How we doing, everybody out there? Did you worry maybe, come on, are Dave and a Dan, even though there's no Dan on the show, but there are plenty out there. I mean, they can't be taping the show, not with Thanksgiving right here on the agenda. No, we make that time for you because you make that time for us. Dave, thank you so much for making some time during this middle of the Thanksgiving week here. What I got to ask you is your Thanksgiving experiences. Now, I don't know if you want to talk about when you grew up or now what you've implemented in your own household. Are you somebody who makes people go around the table and do what they're thankful for?
I'm not, but it is part of the routine. Yes, it is. And it's always pretty generic. The trick to that is you have to mix it up. You can make it fun, right? Like if you have a New Year's dinner, you can make that fun when they do that type of stuff. If you have Thanksgiving, you can make it fun, but you have to be unique. You can't just come out with the whole like my family or being alive. You know, it has to be something.
Well, that brings me to my question. If you are somebody who partakes in that environment, even if it's not voluntarily, you know you're going somewhere where this is always thrown out there. Is this like the NBA slam dunk competition where you're like Jordan, you only know once it gets to you, you're going to kind of figure it out? Or is this like an Oscar speech where you've been thinking about what you're thankful for, and when it comes around to you, you have a nice, clear, and concise answer as to what you are indeed thankful for?
It could not be further from my mind until it starts.
Okay, then, so you're Jordan.
But here's what you do. You just go, all right, start there and go that way, right? Like you can dictate where it starts, right? If you jump in, no one on Thanksgiving is going to be like, no, we're starting here. So if you see what I'm saying, there's a little calculation.
Yeah, if you get ahead of it, you can buy yourself some time.
Exactly.
Just last week at one of these Friendsgivings, the first one I've ever been to, which is a scam. It's not my friends. You know, I went to my girls, but the host made us do one of those round tables, and she started at her husband, who said, well, no, you just don't put me on the spot like that. Let's start and go around. So and then it goes around, it gets back to him. He goes, wait, didn't I answer already? He used what he said about starting over there as a way I already spoke during this whole thing.
Yeah, that's how he tried to started over there.
Yeah. That's pretty solid. Well, thank you, Dave, for making some time here during Thanksgiving week.
For sure, man.
You know, people are going to be chasing some losses that they inevitably are going to encounter on Thursday when they have a max 14 leg parlay put in there. But happy Thanksgiving, and I guess let's hope this is a lucky week 13 opposed to unlucky. Now, there's a game that I'll just come right out and start with, because as I go through some of the games, there are ones that kind of catch my attention, whether it's from a player props perspective or a donkey charts perspective, and that is this game right here between the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts. Now, when you were looking at this game, I know you take a look at every single game throughout the week, and I actually put at the end of my videos, Dave's thumbnail is there. I linked that video of his to the end of these videos if you want to see his take on all the games. How do you like that? 2 weeks in a row for some Dave promotion for you coming from me.
But you picked 2 bad weeks though, because I did not do well last week.
It's all good. It happens.
Yeah, you're gonna have some winners, some losers. That's the way it goes.
Nobody remembers last week, even if you won them thousands of dollars. So that's, you know. So if they're all about looking forward, then we will do just that. What was your take here? If you can kind of summarize it, give me the AI cliff. How crazy is it that I can actually go to AI and ask for your cliff notes on your video? In fact, AI gives a summary of these videos, and I've seen it try to summarize our videos, but I'm such a wild card, they don't know what to do. I've heard them say, Dave and Dan try to discuss, I got them. But but what was your take more or less here on this game between a Colts team who for a third straight game has seen Daniel Jones look like the Daniel Jones we grew accustomed to? Now, they weaseled one win of those 3 games, but they had a stranglehold on that last game and let it slip because Daniel Jones couldn't get like a single first down in the second half. How are we feeling here with CJ Stroud coming back, going into Indy, who's starting to slip a little bit?
Yeah, it's, you mentioned Daniel Jones, but that, like, Davis Mills got 3 straight wins. You know, Davis Mills, I'll scream it from the rooftops, and I did prior to that first start. He's not that bad. Like, he was a starter before. He's not good, but he's not that bad either. They finally have a really, really good defense. This is a tough
That's an
matchup,
understatement, man. They were
dude. Their
going.
defense is nasty. I mean, what I assume you watched some of that game. What they did, I mean, you want to talk about tenacity and just like never a motor that doesn't stop. Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson getting to Josh Allen, dude, he would try and roll out of the pocket, and there's someone in his face, and then he try and
It
get
was
the other way,
insane.
someone in his face, and then someone's coming up the middle. Dude, he could not get away. I think they sacked him 8 times. That defense is ferocious, and not only that, the secondary is so good that you buy time for the edge rushers to get there and for the pass rush to get there. They're an absolutely filthy defense, man. In my opinion, best in the league.
And where did you lean? I know some games you don't really have a strong feeling for, but for this particular game, where did you fall on the spectrum? Was this one you kind of had a lean for? It's like, you know what?
So last week I was on the Texans just for obvious reasons, right? At home, getting like 6.5 points. Here, this is a little bit tough only because I still have a tough time buying into this Houston offense. And I'll go as far to say this much. The Buffalo Bills last week, they have some real deficiencies on defense. And it was pretty obvious that Houston early on wanted to try and throw on them because this is just my interpretation of it. I think that they thought that Buffalo just expected them to run as much as possible because Buffalo's so weak on the run defense, right? Because Davis Mills was like 1 for 9 passing to start the game, and they kept going to the passing game. And it ended up working because they kept putting Josh Allen in bad situations. In this case, this is different, man. Like the Colts have a pretty decent run defense. Hunt had 105 4 yards last week, but it was on 30 carries. And they have Sauce Gardner, you have Charvarius Ward. This is a really good defense. I probably would. I haven't bet this. I probably actually would lean Colts here in this spot.
So, couple different things when assessing this game from my perspective. Number one, I think you're going to have an Indianapolis Colts team who's going to grow increasingly unlikely to just allow Daniel Jones to essentially do what he did earlier in the year, where the more he was successful passing it, the more vertical that passing attack became. And there were certain games he was lighting it up, but it's looked nothing like that. And I believe psychologically, when you're playing a team who struggles on offense like the Houston Texans do, you're way more inclined to just keep feeding Taylor and somewhat call it a little more conservatively when you need a win. You lose another game, it starts to kind of become a story, starts to become a disaster against a defense that is operating at that level that Houston is coming off that huge win. And I'm not saying, primetime, that team had a huge game, now you bet on them the next game. Although they are the team that I would take here simply because if you removed all of this, you have 2 playoff hopeful teams in the same division. I've always said, if it's plus 3.5 or more, just give me the underdog. I don't have to think about it. I'll do that till the end of time. So when it comes to picking some potential spreads here, let's see if CJ Stroud is a potential downgrade to the offense. But this game between a Colts team that I just don't think is going to be feeling that great about themselves, they barely got by the Falcons. So if they barely got by the Falcons, then I believe that if they get by Houston, it's going to be a barely got by Houston as well.
It could be. But I mean, also the Panthers beat the Falcons. The Falcons beat the Saints.
Yeah,
the Saints
you hooked up with her,
Panthers.
but then she wouldn't hook up with him, but
right.
then he hooked up. Yeah, it's just this whole weird hierarchy of how the hell did that happen?
Yeah, so it's just like the whole transitive property game is hard to play in the NFL week over week. Like I hear you outside of 3. I get it. I just think this Colts defense, they gave that game away, but at the same time, they held Patrick Mahomes and them to 20 points in regulation, and that was a must-win game for the Chiefs. Like Chiefs would have fallen below 500. So I think every week and every game is unique to those circumstances.
Yep.
In a spot like this, for me, Colts coming off that loss, a bit of a slide here. They had a bye 2 weeks ago. There's a part of me that goes, you know what, Houston's defense is good, but can this offense actually buoy them? And I'm not convinced it can.
That's perfectly fine because the only reason I talked about this, I worked backwards. I worked from the end of the magazine to the front where I had some other stuff that I liked. And I said, ultimately, I believe this leads me to kind of taking possibly the Texans and potentially the under, because my thought process here, I'm going to do that thing where I ask you questions and I'm absolutely not trying to trick you, but I'm just setting up what I like in this game. Which part of the defense would you say the Colts upgraded in the most, and will teams probably try to stay away from?
I know Patrick Mahomes threw for 350 last week, but I don't know about you. It certainly didn't feel like it, right?
No, it was run after the catch, Rashee Rice, after he made an 8-yard catch and turned it into a 40-yard catch. Yeah. Okay.
No touchdowns and an interception in that game. Colts red zone defense was fantastic. I mean, I would say if you had to pick apart the Colts, it would be on the ground. They had 30 carries. By the way, real quickly, how did Mahomes throw 46 times and Kareem Hunt also had 30 carries?
I do know how that can happen. And that is the Indianapolis Colts couldn't get a single first down in the second half. So the Chiefs just continue to run play after play after play after play.
Guess how many offensive plays? Dude, they had 96 offensive plays. 96.
And this dusty Kareem Hunt got to do what he did last year. 30 carries finally gets him to a good game. So we have this secondary that's been upgraded on the Colts, and you saw the Chiefs just continue to run even though they had dusty Kareem Hunt. And would you say that the Houston offensive line is a strong suit in pass protection?
No.
Correct.
They've improved. Correct. They have improved actually a lot, but no, it's certainly not a strong suit. You're going to Woody Marks here, and I don't blame you because Nick Chubb's no good at this point.
I'm going to a place that I don't normally go.
Not going Marks. Okay. Where's Stroud rushing?
Where's the city? Where's the city? Like I'm going to a place that I don't normally go. Cleveland, Ohio. I don't think I'm going to find myself there anytime soon. And look, I'm sorry if you're watching from Cleveland. Columbus, Ohio. How about that? I'm more likely to be in Columbus. I'm more likely to be in Columbus to catch a random Jackets game than I am in Cleveland. Or maybe I'll go all the way to Ohio because I know Ohio's one of those states that has 75 sports books, ones I've never heard of. When I was in Ohio, I checked there was something called Bet Jack. Who's Jack? And how can I bet with him? So I don't know who that is. Bet Jack. See if on Bet Jack over there in Ohio, they have CJ Stroud under 235.5 passing yards. This was a guy to me who was struggling immensely beforehand all season, hasn't played in a while. And I think these two teams are going to have a little scared game on offense where they don't want to make a huge play to tip the game in either team's direction. One big interception, one big mistake can be the difference in what I think will be a relatively low scoring game. You know, when Indianapolis approaches this game, they know what Houston did on defense. You think they want to drop back and let Daniel Jones deal with that same type of pass rush that Josh Allen couldn't deal with? So I believe this is going to be a defensive battle. So you're talking about front page bets. I guess this all translates into the under. But for me here, either of these quarterbacks, the under. But for me, I'm focusing on CJ Stroud in his first game back. I'll take that under 235.5 passing yards. What do you think about that? Decent reasoning?
Yeah, I mean, look, I took the under on Mills last week too, and it got there kind of luckily, but it got there mostly because of their defense, right? So that's the other out you have here in this bet is you have a really tough matchup in the passing game for the Houston Texans, but you also have a defense, and you're saying this, but you also have a defense that is so good that it doesn't force them often to pass. Like it's not likely that this team fall, and they could, right? We saw it happen actually a few weeks ago against Jacksonville. If that happens, all bets are off because he's just going to be indiscriminately chucking it. But I like that. I would consider pairing that with Woody Marks over 14.5 rushing attempts because Nick Chubb at this stage of the game, man, he seems pretty washed. We saw that on prime time the other day. There's not much gas left in the tank there. And you're just continuing to see Woody Marks take a larger and larger workload. He wasn't special last game, but he was a whole lot better than Nick Chubb.
Yep, absolutely. He got that right. Chubb, I mean, I think he weaseled his way maybe to the over just because.
He did not. It was 21
he did
and a
not?
half. He got 18. No, because I had him as the last leg in my parlay.
And you'll always remember that guy who screwed you in the end. Also another great thing about taking that potential parlay you just mentioned is, and this CJ Stroud play, you saw when they had a lead that was very surmountable. You often hear about insurmountable leads, but it was a very surmountable lead, and you saw the play calling approach from Houston. Even though the pass was working, once they had that lead and once they were in the second half, they just kept running the ball. Now, maybe that's because it was the Bills' run defense, but they were quick to abandon the pass once they had a lead. So that's something maybe you can get behind if they do happen to be playing from ahead. So yeah, the over on Marks rushing attempts with that under on Stroud passing yards seems like a decent play to me. And if you don't mind, Dave, if there are any other games that caught your attention when you were breaking down the slate, I can always give you the assistance of the donkey charts if any of those stood out to you when you were going through these games and there was anything that was like, oh, well, did you talk about any of these games that actually you leaned a specific way? And are you with Dan or are you against him?
Well, do you have the donkey charts by any chance? Do we have them for this week?
Are you not seeing them on the screen?
Now I am. There we go. Cool. I was looking at the sides. Okay. So there's one that's not on here. I'm not surprised by the Lions. They're inside of a field goal. They got beat up pretty bad in week 1 against Green Bay. I kind of like the Lions here, honestly. I'm a bit surprised. I shouldn't even say that. I want to say I am only because they haven't looked great recently. But people get inside, you get inside a field goal, and that's just one of those things. But there is one spot that I wanted to talk about, and we can get to that Dolphins game in a second too, because I'm not convinced I love them as 6-point favorites. But what about the Cleveland Browns and the 49ers? I mean, the Cleveland Browns with HOU CJ Stroud, this isn't to say that he did anything special. He just wasn't bad, and that's kind of what you need. Dylan Gabriel is the poor man's game manager, which is crazy to think about. But Myles Garrett is so good that he's just single-handedly wrecking games for opposing quarterbacks, right? Like, he could break the record in 3 more games. I think he has like 17 sacks already or something, and the record's 22 or 23 by Strahan. They're 5-point dogs against the 49ers, and yeah, I get that, but 49ers, we saw them and Brock Purdy against an okay defense in Carolina at home last week. This Cleveland defense is seriously a force. Like, you want to talk about Houston's defense? If you put even a remotely competent quarterback with one decent pass catcher in Cleveland, this team is not one that you really feel like playing each week because of how good the defense is.
Do you remember? Something tells me you're going to remember because it wasn't pretty when they played the Eagles in a huge showdown. But do you remember the seemingly unstoppable Niners team from 2 years ago when they started off just murdering everybody? They eventually ended up in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know?
Oh, yeah, they killed the Eagles that year.
Do you know who the first team was to beat them? And this is coming straight off the top of my head.
Was it the Browns?
You just brought this up. I believe it was in Cleveland against the Browns where they were more than double-digit favorites. So if you want some, ghosts of yesteryear to help you in that bet, I believe that Purdy had his first really bad game as a pro. If you remember, he had that streak going where he only had one loss in X amount of games, and because he got injured during the playoffs against the Eagles and then came out winning a bunch of straight games the following year until they got to Cleveland. Now, I believe they lost on a last-second field goal that didn't go through, but Purdy struggled immensely there. He obviously came back from that injury, struggled I could say immensely last week in comfortable home confines against the Carolina Panthers We'll see how it goes this week, but I kind of like where your head's at because you have some, reinvigorated energy. It doesn't matter if S.Sanders is going to be a long-term answer. Or you have a team who's going to be playing relatively harder, like when the Raiders got Antonio Pierce coaching in there, and all of a sudden they threw some decent efforts. Now, it wasn't every single week, but you had more spirited performances, and this Cleveland team getting that win last week, the Niners are like a fake good team right now when you look at all their injuries and how they're kind of duct taping everything together.
Yeah. I mean, you look at Cleveland too at home. You want to talk about double-digit dogs? They were double-digit dogs to the Packers and they won, right? Outright. They were big dogs against the Bengals in week 1. A healthy Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. They lost by a point towards at the end of that game. You look at these other games. The Minnesota game was actually in London, but they covered there. The game against Miami, they destroyed Miami in Cleveland, right? And then against Baltimore, you saw that game just 2 weeks ago. Yeah, they lost, but they still covered. They lost by 7, but the spread was 8. And the only reason they lost by 7 was the final touchdown of the game with like a couple minutes left to Mark Andrews. Aside from that, Lamar Jackson had a terrible game. They had to do a trick play like end around style with Mark Andrews to get that 43-yard touchdown or whatever it was. So, you just look at that and you go, Lamar Jackson in Cleveland, they hounded him all day. He wasn't able to do anything in that. So I have a lot of respect for anyone who watches my videos knows this too. Whenever Cleveland's at home, I typically, Andy, I usually bet them assuming the number is decent, and it usually is. I feel like the market still haven't corrected for how good this defense is, particularly at home this year. And they were on the road in Las Vegas. They sacked Geno 10 times and had a 2-touchdown win with, again, Shedeur Sanders. Like, it doesn't.
Yo, I thought of you when he hit that long pass to Judy. Getting ready to text you, like, oh my God. But then I saw how the play ended, and then I put the phone
fumble,
down. He's probably not getting any more looks the rest of the way. But did he get to his over on that one catch?
I think it was like a 39-yard catch. Yeah, he did, because he was at 33 yards. He had one reception for 39 yards, and it got there. And, of course, a lost fumble.
So when you want to talk about quarterbacks struggling in defenses, nobody's struggling more than J.J. McCarthy and those Minnesota Vikings. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Murphy's Law, right?
Of course.
Yes.
What can go wrong? Yeah.
Will go wrong. I used to have my own fake saying. Oh, I used to say this to nice people like Al. Oh, I said this to Alex back in the office back in the day. Alex is the nicest guy, as you know, and as you've heard, people kind of just do this, do that, and he does it because he's such a nice guy. And I said, who can be taken advantage of will be taken advantage of.
Yep.
So it's Murphy's Law on roids. So where the hell was I going with this? Sam Darnold at home against the Vikings. There's nothing where Murphy's Law for the Vikings is for J.J. McCarthy to look exactly how he's looked. The two quarterbacks who left there to be on winning teams looking great. And the final nail in the coffin of a miserable year for Vikings fan is going to be just please don't let him go nuts against us. Please do not let Darnold have a good game against us. I'm betting on misery. I'm betting on a Minnesota guy. I'm betting on Gordon Bombay's brother not wanting to see Sam Darnold succeed to kind of justify the decision, which is why I think the Sam Darnold over 1.5 touchdowns, or if you want to take the over on his passing yards, what I cooked up for you was 2 touchdowns for Darnold, 250 passing yards. That's a plus 212. I just think I'm betting on misery. Okay, you want to call that? I mean, I call my stuff Sniffs. I like siding with misery, and I think more misery is coming for those Minnesota Vikings fans.
You only have two of the three. Like, can you expand that image so we can see the Rashid Shaheed ladder to round out that parlay up to 100? Can we get can we get the Shaheed to 100 in there to get us at 25 to 1?
No, this is the misery parlay, meaning, yeah, that's going to screw you too. It's everyone.
Don't
It's
do it. Yeah,
everyone.
don't do
No,
it.
no, but however you want to look at it, I feel like I would feel most comfortable with the touchdowns just because, like that, I feel like that is what the coaches can kind of control. You can't really control if the game calls for continued throwing and throwing, but you can around in the red zone call for more throws to get this guy some passing touchdowns. So
No,
I
I like
believe
it.
Sam Darnold is the play calling will be skewed in a way for him to have a good game. And are you thinking about 3 touchdowns? I always just get scared. 3 touchdowns seems like a lot
Yeah.
of touchdowns,
They're also
but
they're very willing to give Kenneth Walker, actually really Zach Charbonnet, the
yeah,
ball in the in the red zone at the goal line. They yeah, three is a lot, especially because Minnesota's defense isn't really the problem, right? I mean, the
not at
problem
all.
is that J.J. McCarthy continuously puts the opposing offense in favorable field position. That's really, excuse me, that's really what it is. It doesn't go beyond that. Like, the defense isn't the issue. Jordan Love threw for 150 yards last week or whatever it was. Emmanuel Wilson was good, but no, the J.J. McCarthy's having an awful, I mean, truly dismal season. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if sooner than later Justin Jefferson pulls an A.J. Brown, removes his jersey, waves it around, and runs his ass through the tunnel before halftime.
It's rough because in his mind, he's probably like, no, it's always, I'm always going to be eating good here. Look what our coach has done. Look what I've done with Cousins, with
Exactly.
Darnold. There's not going to be a
Exactly.
situation that isn't going to work. And I think that whole offense is learning the hard way. As far as fantasy goes, it's a decent philosophical discussion because so many times when it's, draft season, people say like everybody was worried about Justin Jefferson last year. Look, it was fine with Darnold. Stop worrying about a quarterback not being able to get a wide receiver there. Can I argue there are valid concerns for that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, man. Yes. If you some there are times where if you just make one change, that's all that matters. The difference is, like, can a good quarterback still operate, a little bit with no pass catchers? Sure. We've seen Brady do it in the past. We've seen a few times where a guy like Baker Mayfield, we've seen him do that at times with bad pass catchers where everybody's hurt. But eventually the luck runs out. The difference is the inverse does not work. Like, yes, you might have a decent season as a elite pass catcher with a bad quarterback, like a Jake Browning throwing to Jamar Chase. He'll have some spike weeks, but that's different. A great receiver with a terrible quarterback, it just like it doesn't work, man. It doesn't. The funny thing though is you could just put a decent quarterback, like even slightly below average, like take a Davis Mills, right? I think that's a fair comp. Put like Davis Mills in, and he can still give Nico Collins an easy 1,000-yard season, no doubt
Yeah.
about that. And because of that defense, they'll win some games. But you put like a Dylan Gabriel in there, or really seriously at this point, JJ McCarthy. Actually, here's the best example I could think of, Andy. Carson Wentz in there was still producing good numbers for Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, even
Yeah.
though they
So
were
that, but
losing
that's
games.
that's the opposite side. So like it's weird. Yeah, that would lend you to believe. Like, so yeah, so take Jefferson first round. Right? Last year, people, you can't take Neighbors first round. It's Daniel Jones. Now this is the old Daniel Jones. Yet he still had a massive year. So there are a lot of instances where there is a bad quarterback, and they still do, return that top wide receiver value. But I've always scoffed at that notion. I'm like, yeah, but not really. Not really, man. Like if there's anything that can absolutely tank a
For
wide
sure.
receiver, it's just a brutal quarterback.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm saying even that like one tier up is so much more impactful than you could imagine, right? So when you have a bottom barrel quarterback like a Tyler Shuck or in his current state, or a JJ McCarthy, these type of guys, or really Justin Fields from the large portion of this season, if you had even taken a slight step up, right? Like Joe Flacco in this current stage of his career, he's not above average. You know, a lot of these guys are not above average, but I mean, any of these guys would take Jameis Winston on the drop of a dime, right? Even that's what I'm saying. Even Carson Wentz is still a below average quarterback, but he was exponentially better for these wide receivers than JJ McCarthy was. And that says a lot. That's really less praise towards Wentz and more of an indictment on how McCarthy has played.
The same can't be said for running backs, though. I don't know how you feel about running backs, but I would never, even Saquon. I don't care. I mean, this year's a great example, but even if I didn't need,
Ashton Genty.
Miles
How about
Sanders,
Ashton Genty?
Exactly. You can kind of throw anyone in there and they could be productive, which is why I wanted to ask you about a guy. Now, all the props I'm interested in aren't exactly there yet. I feel like you're going to know what I'm going to want, but I only saw one on him, so I'm pulling it up. How about, if you're an intro to football guy, this might not be the player for you. You might go, who the hell is this? D.Neal, the last running back standing. I once worked at a job that they never, they kept refusing to promote certain people, but enough people finally left the job and got hired elsewhere that this guy finally got a raise. And one guy goes to him, he's like, you're kind of like the king who just didn't die. You became king by not dying. And that's where D.Neal has found himself, but he got like 88% of the running back work. And he's going to have tons of work here in a game where you wanted to talk about this game briefly against the Miami Dolphins. What do you see here for Neal? He had a bunch of catches. Apparently he was a good receiver in college.
Yeah, Kansas.
What did you feel about, you thought it was too big of a spread, but if they do get up, man, you see some catches for, I mean, what would his receiving prop even be at? 13.5 or something like that, which means his rushing and receiving would be 46. I don't mind this for a guy who, other than Taysom Hill, who's only going to be used in short, the short yardage ram plays. I think he has a lot of opportunity here for Neal against a defense that earlier in the year was as bad as it gets.
Have you looked at Bet365 by any chance? Because a lot of times they post them early. Let me see if he has a receiving line.
Well,
No,
I'll just,
he doesn't.
Scared.
He doesn't.
They know I'm on the lookout.
Nobody.
They know I check 365.
They really don't have anybody else. D.Neal's a guy I drafted a bunch of in best ball late in the season, and the reason was actually because Alvin Kamara is, like, honestly, D.Neal has. You want to talk about an indictment on players, like big time indictment on D.Neal that he needed everybody to get hurt before he could have a solid outing or a solid workload, because Kendre Miller was in the doghouse. He actually was playing well. We were betting the overs on a bunch of him, or on a bunch on him.
We've talked about that guy. I swear to you, if you Google Kendre Miller, one of our convos will come up, because nobody's talked about this guy that much.
Well, we always had over the target with Kendre Miller. Yeah. And he's done. Alvin Kamara, he's been wildly inefficient this year.
Oh, he's done.
No, yeah. He's averaging 3.5 yards per attempt. And even worse, in the passing game, where he's been so proficient over the years, he's been so, outside of one or two big catch and runs. I'll tell you something crazy about Kamara, man. His longest rush attempt is 18 yards this year, and he hasn't scored a touchdown since
Sounds like
one.
McCaffrey.
Yeah, right. Except McCaffrey. Seriously, except McCaffrey, man. McCaffrey's still been good in the passing game, and the volume is just exorbitant. Plus, he plays on a team where they're willing to give him 30 touches a game.
Yeah, I know. I was just...
No, you're right, though. Like, from an efficiency standpoint, that hasn't been all that far off. But D.Neal, he had 7 for 18 last game. They were playing in they were in a hole early on. I think 32 is interesting.
But see his catches?
Yeah, 5 for 43 on 7 targets. That's why I think you probably, I'm going to say like 24.5.
No, they're not. No, they don't have the balls to do that. No,
I guess you're right, because people are going to jam.
They said Kamara's at like 14.5, right?
No. Kamara's usually at like 19, 20.
Well, because earlier in the year they moved it all the way down because he was getting 0 catches. They
Yeah,
weren't using him at all. So maybe it
19.
went up recently. But all right, this is a great game that we've kind of come up with. Give me what's your prices right? D.Neal receiving prop,
I'll give
and
him
then
the
his
Alvin.
rushing and receiving.
I'll give him the Alvin Kamara number. I will literally just give him the Alvin Kamara number. Give him 19 and 18 and a half on receiving. So if you're talking rushing plus receiving, you're talking like 51 and a half.
I'm going 14 and a half,
I would
which
hammer the over if it's 14 and a half.
and that's why I brought this up. So now you have a pick. Not you, Dave, people who are listening. Here's how you do some deductive reasoning. Oh, this is not out there. Andy thinks it's going to be 14 and a half. Dave said if it's around 14 and a half, you hammer it. So here's the key word. If it's 14 and a half, you hammer it. If it's 15 and a half, a regular deli slice of a bet. But I like this, and I like his rushing and receiving because then you're going to get 2 cracks at it. One long run or dump offs if they're down bit. So I kind of like his rushing and receiving. I kind of like rushing and receiving the most, to be honest. I like the fact that he's going to be out there in a ton of situations other than short yardage. I'm not concerned about touchdowns, whatever. And I mean, he's going to have many chances in between the 20s to chew up some yardage here. So be on the lookout for some D.Neal rushing and receiving. So that one passes the sniff test.
I think so, absolutely. I also just pulled it up. D.Neal pass blocking grade on PFF. Take it for what it's worth. But I mean, Alvin Kamara's was so bad that it was almost in the negatives this year. That's helpful, right? That's pretty helpful. Among the 3 running backs, D.Neal's pass blocking grade is actually better than the other 2. Of course, Miller's out, and Kamara I don't think is going to play. But yeah, that helps because as well as I do, if you can't pass block, a lot of these guys aren't going to be out there. The fact that he saw 7 targets with 5 of them caught 43 yards, now I'm really curious to see what this number comes in at.
I can't wait to get that. When your text pops, it ain't going to be about. It's going to be D.Neal.
Well, the
related.
Bowers one. That remember, I was like, man, if this is whatever number, the Bowers one. We talked about laddering it in the video. Of course, I didn't. I bet it. It was a 2-unit play for me. I threw that up on Tails. All of my picks are free there, by the way. Andy's always kind enough to put my link in the description. And Andy, I'm giving away 3 months of NFL Sims Max for DFS players. So if they want to jump in on that, that's all they got to do. Follow me on Tails and like the post.
Okay, now for regulars out there, the Sims,
it's like $600 value.
The Sims allow you to kind of just crank out algorithmic type of optimal lineups and this, that, and the other.
They literally simulate the field tens of thousands of times and tell you what lineups would have performed best. Yeah, they're incredible tools. We've had 3 guys win $1 million just this season using the tools. So yeah, they're awesome. They're very fun. Are you still playing DFS? I'd love to just hook you up with a sub, have you use it. You love them.
I promise you, if there was no such thing as the NHL, I'd be in the truest NFL bunkers. I would.
Swamped.
I would be in the truest, like when I had more time, like when I was at Odd Shopper and I just had to kind of make videos and, here and there and just send it up to
a lot of DFS.
Like tons of DFS. I was in I don't even really have time to crank out much NFL stuff at all other than this, of course. But I do wanted to ask you something because, there are no sponsors here, so we can openly talk about this theoretically. We've mentioned how it's smarter. If you're a parlay pirate, don't worry about what I'm about to say. But like good closing line value can screw your account on many of the sports books. Meaning if you continuously get the early Brock Bowers 50 and you nail it and it ends up at 64, they're writing down their little notebook. Let's start to screw this guy. So my question to you is, if you sniff out a line that you like Brock Bowers, but you only take the alts, does that confuse the system? Because it's like, oh, this guy, there you go.
I mean, I can't say for sure, but I would be almost, look, betting the over alone is going to be better for your account health than betting a lot of unders, right? So betting the over alone and then like laddering it. I have certain books where that's all I do. Like all I'll do is use boosted parlays, try and keep the limits okay. Bet alts, bet ladder plays, which are alts, of course, but like all of that stuff. So yeah, no doubt about it. All of that stuff keeps
So
you
what
from
would
getting
you
flagged.
say for this advice? If you're out there and you think you got a great number and you smell it's going to move, let's say it's that Brock Bowers at 50 and a half that it
Mhm.
opened up at, and then it closed at like 62. Taking the 60 as your, like, don't take the regular line. Only take a little 60 and 70. And then if you want, you could see if it moves, and then you could take the over later in the week. But essentially, I'm saying declining the straight bet that you know is going to have good closing line value in order to still get great value on an alt, because you know that alt is essentially going to be the line down the road, and also not get flagged in the system. What do you think about
Maybe,
that
but
for a plan?
maybe, but I also don't know like how much of the algorithm flagging you has to do with betting early in general. Like if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
if you're betting it
Yeah.
as soon as it comes out, maybe that doesn't matter because here's the thing. Hold on, real quick,
No,
Andy.
I got
Here's the
something
thing.
funny. I got something funny.
But here's this is the thing. If you bet the 60, you might have a better chance of getting flagged because you're betting it at plus money and the 60 is probably moving to minus money. And if you're betting plus money stuff that's moving to minus money, you're still getting closing line value on those. So it doesn't really make a difference. It probably makes it worse. So the fact that you're betting the over, you should be okay.
Well,
Just don't go straight.
the reason it's so funny because you're fighting a supercomputer, right? Like you're trying
Yeah,
to
of course.
make the right moves, but the funny part is you don't get feedback. Like you have to invent a theory, and then I'm just arguing with nobody. Like, well, I did this because then I'm tricking it, but you never get a fucking verification that you're doing anything that's working at all. So it's almost like you're like Willem Dafoe in Spider-Man, just like arguing with yourself in a mirror, but we got to keep the CLV down. Meanwhile, none of this can be doing anything. They can have you flagged as an absolute donkey for what you've done 3 years ago. And I think it's a very funny kind of
Yeah,
part of
I
the
look at
game that
it.
gets overlooked.
I look at it as like the Wizard of Oz. Um, if you ever get limited and you ask a sports book, like, why did I get limited? Or, can you lift my limits or increase my limits? They'll go, well, we spoke with the trading team and they told us that that is not possible at this time. And you go, well, what did the trading team say? They go, well, the trading team doesn't talk to just anybody. They are the trading team.
Yeah,
And,
of
and
course.
no joke, like it is honestly represent like it's like Wizard of Oz, where it's just they pretend that there's this all-knowing
Yeah, a
trading
faceless.
team out
Yeah,
there.
it's a
Uh,
faceless commit. It's Roger
exactly.
Goodell.
It's an entity.
Yeah. Yep,
Yeah,
it's Goodell.
and I actually believe that these customer service reps don't actually have any clue about anything. I do honestly believe that. They're just the messengers, but it's like even they can't talk to the trading team, right? Like it's just the trading teams hits a
Dave, they don't
button and
even
it
know
just
what a
sends
trading team is. This is some
exactly.
guy in Bangladesh.
Yeah,
One time
yeah.
I had a chat window open up with him.
Jim, by the
And
way, Jim in Bangladesh.
yeah, so it was it gave me a regular girl's name and a picture of it gave me a little picture of some attractive girl in the corner. And I said, out of curiosity, is that picture that I see in the corner actually who I'm speaking to, or is that just a generic stock images that I can reverse search on the internet? I said, once again, I'm like, so is that a generic stock image? And the 3 words they gave is, that is correct, period. It's just so funny to hear them
That's
say
amazing.
that is correct. So that's just a random hot girl. You've decided, well,
Yep.
maybe if I choose the hot girl, they'll be a little softer on me here in Bangladesh. And I found that so funny. That is correct. And I hope a lot of our sniffs were correct here as well. Dave, thanks again. Coming here Thanksgiving week. I got that link below for Dave Stuff on Tails. Follow him there. You get your deal on your sim kits if you do DFS. So definitely check that out. We'll be back with you next week. Week 14, Dave and Adan back to bye week. No buys this week.
Yep.
And then the random week 14 buys, which is kind of a weird thing, but we're looking forward to it. Dave, we're filming this right before Thanksgiving, so I hope you have a good one. You know, I hope when you show up at that free throw line, you got a good thank you ready. And hopefully I'm not asked because I got nothing. But I'll let you know next week if I have a good one. Take it easy and happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, man.